Drip is an extremely important part of any build. Nobody cares if you're better than them or have a stronger build than them if you don't look good. And in today's video, I'll be breaking down how you can make your best drip possible in this complete and comprehensive guide to making proper outfits in Deepwoken. Make sure to subscribe, since only about 20% of the people watching right now are actually subscribed. And now let's get into it. When we break it down, drip comes in three major categories: color balancing, silhouette, or the shape of your build, and referentials. Color balancing is pretty straightforward, being the way that you utilize matching and contrasting and clashing color combinations to supplement your build. Having a properly color balanced build adds both character and style to any build, and depending on the colors you use, you could even be more unique than other people, even if your build is, kind of copy and paste. Silhouette is the general shape of your character, and it has everything to do with what you're wearing. Silhouettes from non-matching hats and coats can make you look bulky and imbalanced, while lack of silhouette can make your build look flat and boring or 2D. The third category is a bit more of a wild card, however, that kind of bypasses the rules of the last two. Referentials are anything in reference to a character or person that kind of change the rules of how your drip should work. Generally, focusing on color balance and silhouettes are important. However, when your build is a reference to a character, all of that is thrown out the window because you're only being judged on how faithful your recreation of that character is. Jotaro from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, for example, wears two belts which are both different prime colors. And while I'd call that imbalanced, it doesn't matter because he's Jotaro. And this goes the same for any cosplay or character build in Deepwoken. Take this Jiraiya Zeppeli build, for example. Without context of who this is, this build may look terrible to you. But in context of Jiraiya Zeppeli and who he's supposed to be, the build is a faithful recreation to the character, with the bell being a green ball as a reference to his spin balls. It matches up in context and therefore is okay, despite being a complete polar opposite of good color or silhouette balancing. But it doesn't matter, because it's Gyro. However, this video isn't on why you can copy characters, because anyone can do their best to make a cosplay. This video is about how you can make your best drip possible, which is why I'm here to help. So let's go over the first two categories in much more detail. First of all, being color balancing. You first need to understand what you can provide color to on any given build. Really think about where color comes from in Deepwoken. Your race's skin color, potential ornaments and decoratives, and markings are all important things to consider. Your earrings, scarves, boots, cloaks, capes, jacket, armor, and even, yes, potentially your rings, all bring color. Which, on the subject of rings, many people believe that I completely hate rings. I do not. Most of you just can't utilize them properly. A key detail to remember is that something small should always match something large in your build. If you have a visible red ring, you should have a larger piece of red somewhere on your drip that isn't too close to the ring. A good example is one of my builds, where I use a Signet ring. The ring is gold and red, which matches the gold con circlet on my head and the red blindfold on my face. So it is properly balanced because it has both of these colors on the build in a different spot, which balances it out. Back to the main subject, however, color balance is very important, and many people lack the ability to properly balance color throughout their build. But an easy schematic is as follows. Make two lines splitting your character across the X and Y axis, or vertically and horizontally. From here, choose your main pieces of clothing, such as your armor, boots, coat or cloak, headwear, scarves, etc. Then from there, begin mirroring colors across either just the horizontal axis or both the horizontal and vertical axis. By doing this, you nearly guarantee your build will be well color coordinated at its base. The reason why you shouldn't mirror across just the vertical line or the Y axis is for two reasons. One, you kinda can't. Most Deepwoken accessories are fixed to one side, meaning you can't get another accessory on the other side to balance it, meaning the only real thing you can do this with is like your bell. And two, even if you could effectively mirror colors and accessories across your Y axis, since Roblox characters are taller than they are, long, it wouldn't look balanced anyway. It would just look like too much of whatever color you're using, since it would be pretty close together to what you're mirroring it to anyway, versus a difference in the vertical level of things would make it look like, oh, if there's yellow on top and yellow on bottom, it kind of adds a certain balance to it. Anyway, from here you can work onto your smaller accessories, like earrings, rings if you can make them work, only if you can make them work, and your bell, which should generally make it so your build is equally colored across it through all its sides and vertices. The more colors you incorporate, however, the harder this becomes, as you now need to balance more colors with the limited space on your body, which is why I personally don't like the Monastery Champions robes. While the robes themselves actually balance color and contrast color pretty well with good combinations combinations of color, the robe takes up so much space on your body, it's now hard to make the rest of your drip match up properly with it, making it inconvenient to use in any well-balanced build. Now, I've spent a lot of time talking about how to balance this color, but I haven't talked about what colors work properly, because you can't just balance any color with any color. That's not how it works. So let's take a look at a color wheel and talk a little bit about color theory. Color theory is pretty much just the study of how colors work together and how they affect our perception of what we're looking at. And this is really important in Deepwoken for your drip, because without color theory, you won't know what looks good, and if you see someone wearing neon purple and then like dark doo-doo green, you're gonna think that guy needs to do some bad things to himself, right? So color theory is very important here. So here is a simple color wheel showing many colors. Let's first consider black and white, which are kind of like the safety colors, as in they will work with basically anything including each other, but not with each other and another color. So ideally use either black and white or black or white in combination with any other color. I'll talk more about black and white and their role because I think they deserve their little own section in this video because of how important and how like misconstrued the usage of black and white in builds is. So we're going to talk more about black and white later. But anyway, since they poorly clash when it combined while also being in presence of another color, you just generally shouldn't use black and white with any other color in your build. Now, as for the color wheel, taking a look at it will show you what colors are supplementary and contrasting to each other. As you see, we have our primary colors. Primary colors being yellow, red, and blue are all too strong to be used on their own, which generally you shouldn't be using only one color on a build. Some people can make it work, but I generally wouldn't recommend using only one color. And I mean, you could use different shades that complement the same color because different shades can complement each other pretty well, but I'd recommend using at least two colors. Now, primary colors can be used with any of their own complementary colors, which are located to its sides and across from them. Now, while these colors combinations are balanced, I wouldn't exactly recommend using the base colors you see on screen on the wheel. While any primary color can work with its complementaries, there are many other color shades for a reason, and finding two shades of color that work better with each other is always better. Blue and purple, for example, do work in conjunction, but a stock blue and purple may be too harsh, so consider lighter or darker tones for each. Now, about contrasting colors. Complete opposite colors on a color wheel can also work in good shades. Green and red, for example, can work in lighter shades of both, meaning if you find the right shades, you can always match up colors that are either next to or across from each other on a color wheel. As for what not to mix, generally don't mix primary colors as they clash in a bad way, such as red and blue, which is overall just too vibrant. Never mix black and white in the presence of another color, and never mix complementary colors because they just don't work with each other, kind of like in the way that primary colors don't work to each other. Ideally, you should just use primary with complementary colors like red and orange or blue and purple shades. You can use just black and white, although it's a bit bland, or you can use black or white with any color, or specifically theme-based color combinations like purple and orange, which although clash negatively, are perceived properly through, the human eye and brains because they signify things like Halloween and therefore have a positive effects on the brain's perception of color, which is why pumpkin builds can fit purple in there with smaller accessories along with green, orange, and black. Now, speaking of smaller accessories, generally they should all be the same one or two colors. Accessories are small, so coloring them all the same color accumulates a certain color along with your build that can help make it look more balanced. So generally, if you're using a lot of really small accessories like earrings, rings, etc., try and balance them out and keep them around the same colors. Now, let's talk about silhouettes. Silhouettes are different from color balancing in the way that not everything actually matters for your silhouette. While every accessory you have has color and therefore affects color balancing on your character, silhouette is only determined by large pieces of equipment, making rings, earrings, facial accessories, and basically anything that isn't bigger than your bell irrelevant. And there are three main types of silhouettes that you can have in Deepwoken. Slim or stock silhouettes are very lacking in detailed gear and often look 2D, flat, or stock, as the secondary name implies. This is generally just done when you don't really wear coats or anything like that, and most of your drip is done through the in-game armor or extra things, kind of like Silent Heart's markings. Chunky silhouettes rely on heavy pieces of armor that completely reshape the body of your character. Stuff like Arc Warder armor and the new heavy Deep Delver armor fall into this category. Heavy chunky silhouettes often have the problem of lacking variety, as with the both previously mentioned examples, those two sets of armor take over pretty much all cosmetics you may have, making chunky builds lack variety, with your only real differentiability between you and other builds is color, and usually they're not even customizable enough to make it worth it. And the final and most popular silhouette type are layered silhouettes, which generally consist of coats or cloaks, longer hair combos that can extend down to the shoulders or even longer depending on how it looks, to provide a more layered or textured look, and usually a good mix of cosmetics and accessories that can blend blend well together. Generally, the biggest hindrance to your silhouettes, however, are boots. Star boots, for example, can look a bit bulky under your coat, making your inner silhouette inconsistent, making the rest of your body under whatever coat or cloak you're wearing look a bit flat and boring when compared to the boots that you're wearing. Generally, I would recommend disabling vanity on most boots unless you can make it work because of this specific issue. Now, there's a few items which fall into a weird gray area of silhouettes where they only work in very specific builds, and this is actually most of the specialized helmets in the game. The Guards Kabuto helmets, for example, are very, very ugly. They don't work in any build except for ones meant to look like samurais because of the theming involved, which makes them in essence more of a referential themed piece rather than one that you can freely use, since they really only work in themed builds meant to reference samurai. This also goes for the Spartan Mohawk helmet and many other items that only work in sets. Some exceptions to this include the pumpkin head and mushroom costume, which are actually more color dependent than anything. While both majorly change your silhouette by changing your head shape, if you can balance the colors of the pumpkin or whatever scroom type that you got, then it will almost always work in a contrasting silhouette build, just because the colors can look really good in it. The pumpkin head is also one of the few times I actively recommend using more than 2 to 3 colors in a build, since Halloween theming allows you to go for orange, purple, black, and even a bit of green to match the pumpkin's stem. So you can actually put a lot of color in certain builds, but it has to be subtle and work properly. Now, the problem with these set pieces is that they're all only really capable of really working in one build, which means people who use them often look exactly the same. A good example of this is the Seltzer Commander set. It can look good, but most people just end up dyeing it all black and making the helmet visor and accents a neon color like blue, red, or some other color that they like, maybe purple. And while I think it looks decent, it's too repetitive with how many people do it at this point. This is why layered silhouettes are often the best and most common non-set piece design. They offer the most variability, uniqueness, and designability for any build in any facet. The high amount of accessories allows for both smooth, layered silhouettes with enough pieces allowing you to properly color balance, which is really good. Now, I just want to talk about some extra stuff that's important to note, such as exclusive cosmetics, hair combos, weapons, and enchants, and specifically the colors black and white, as they are very important to talk about in much more detail, because a lot of people really don't understand the role of the colors black and white in a given build. Anyway, first of all, your weapon and its enchant do matter. Lots of people run a weapon and enchant that don't complement their build because it's good, but if you truly respect the drip, you'll sacrifice some stats for a better looking build. Like, realistically, most weapon differences are negligible. And just because you're running the Darksteel Greatsword doesn't mean you're gonna lose a fight against any player you weren't going to lose to before because you're using a different sword. If you're using a slightly worse weapon for the drip, I promise that like slightly better weapon that you're going to go for that looks worse with your build wasn't going to make a big enough difference to bring you out in any fights that you're going to lose anyway. So just do yourself a favor and your outfit a favor and run weapons that look good with that outfit. And also keep the colors of your enchants in mind, as they can clash with your build and you just lost yourself some points because you prefer heroism over blazing. The color of your enchant and weapon is also generally pretty large, so keep in mind that you can match smaller accents to your weapons like your bell, earrings, and other small accessories as long as they match up with your enchanted weapon. And it can look good and it will work. Now, about hair combos. A lot of people forget that beards exist, which really is a shame because utilizing good combos with beards can add an extra layer of detail and texture that looks really good. Take this build, for example, that I personally really like. This is one of my favorite hair combos to use, and it's quite simple. Some things to avoid as far as hair combos go: multicolored hair that isn't evenly matched in color and doesn't complement your build, obviously. Hair that's too big or too small can also hurt your silhouette, so stay away from like afros and buzz cuts unless you can make it work in a theme or something, like as a clown or a military outfit. A lot of people also overuse extravagant set pieces in their builds with hair combos. A good example of this is the fake Primal Vesperian mask and horns that people like to use. Sure, it looks good, but think about how many people you've seen using that combo, and instead of using that, try something more original, or at least think about how you can spice it up or be more unique while using it if you plan to. And stay away from flashy masks unless it makes sense in the context of your build, and for the love of God, don't use the Maharaga wheel unless you're making a Maharaga build. Just stop using the Wheel of Fate or whatever it's called. Don't use it. As for exclusive cosmetics, that is basically just anything oath dependent or origin dependent. The Vision Shaper eye, Silent Heart rune things that go across your body or whatever, the Arc Warder armor, etc. These all function very differently in a build's outfit. The Vision Shaper eye is easily the most problematic of the three. Since its color can't be changed, using Vision Shaper forces you to incorporate purple. Since the streak is large enough to be noticed but too small to be its own piece, you need something larger like a scarf, bell, coat, blindfold, basically any single or more piece that you have to make purple. Now, you just have to do purple to balance the eye streak. Hopefully the devs add a way to change its color in the future, and that would just make it really much more convenient. As for the Silent Heart body markings, these are a lot more flexible. Since you can change the color, they allow you to add an extra layer of color within your build without affecting your silhouette even slightly. Because of this, I recommend using open coats or sleeveless pieces of armor when using Silent Heart, but a lot of people take this too far, sacrificing texture and silhouette, opting for a stock silhouette without any real layers to it, so they can fit the markings in the build and have them fully visible. But this often makes your build boring. Ideally, use the Silent Heart marks as a way to supplement for color and balance between your builds. And as for the Arc Warder armor, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't really belong in your drip, which is so sad for you Arc Warder lovers, but it's not customizable enough and it's too static to ever be really unique and good in any given build, which is so sad. But yeah, the Arc Warder armor does sadly just suck. Now onto a major topic, the colors black and white. I briefly discussed them earlier, but didn't really go into detail about what they are, how they work, and basically you can see this on a color wheel. So on a color wheel, they are both shades of every color, technically. Because of this, they are both infinitely contrasting and supplementing of each other and every other color, if that makes sense. Black and white can only work together or with any other color. So you can't have black and white and then also have another color in that build. You either have to use black and white or black or white with any other single color. The presence of black or white means you can pretty much never use more than two colors, including black or white. This is because the presence of either of these colors highlights the other colors around them, meaning if you use white and then you use blue and red, it'll cause those blue and reds to essentially be highlighted within your build and clash with each other in a negative way. Generally, they do have their places in most builds, but I'd recommend something less basic and opting for colors like navy blue over black and shades of gray over white, since they offer more flexibility and don't really lock you into using these like two color builds. So if you want to use more, then you should avoid using black and white. Also, I'm tired of seeing all these ultra Vanta black builds with hints of color in them. Same for white builds. Try to be creative instead of making all these boring copy and paste builds. Work with color. Understand color, see what looks good, put it together, make a build off of that. As a general rule though, let's talk about the process for constructing your drip now. First of all, be aware of your race in game and whether or not it'll matter. If your build is going to be utilizing full coverage of your face and body, then your race doesn't matter. If your face is going to be shown, it does matter. So make sure your racial accessories, markings, skin color, and more will all be properly complemented. If you're using a mushroom or pumpkin costume, then the race is also considered irrelevant. From there, be aware of your oath. It's going to make a difference. If you're running Silent Heart, be aware of its markings. If you're running Vision Shaper, you need to complement the purple streak it provides. If you're running Arc Warder, this video isn't for you, so just stop while you're ahead of yourself, and don't even worry about drip. You're not gonna have any of it running Arc Warder. Next, choose your ideal silhouette. Most people are probably going to go with a layered silhouette, since chunky silhouettes are done in sets and are easy to make. I won't really cover that much because, you know, most of the chunky silhouettes in the game are just like 2 or 3 pieces of armor that you put on. And then 2D stock silhouettes don't utilize much anyway, so all you really have to worry about is your actual in-game armor, which is just kind of boring. If you chose a layered silhouette, which most of you do, make sure to choose your ideal hair combo, coat, boots if you can make them work. You probably can't, so just turn them off, scarves or capes, and facial accessories or helmets properly. From there, separate your character mentally with a horizontal line and focus on dyeing your gear, your ideal colors, and keeping balance and symmetrical spread throughout your build. Then focus on your smaller accessories such as your bell, rings only if you can make them work, earrings, and anything else small. Try to make these all similar or the same color spread out along your body. And then choose a good weapon and enchant combo that will complement the colors you've chosen. If you already had a weapon and enchant in mind, then you can replace step 1 with designing the rest of your build around your desired weapon to make sure that everything matches properly. And as for armor enchants placed within your build, they really don't have one except in very specific scenarios. The only time any armor enchant will ever really work is specifically in certain builds. Like Entanglement, for example, is just ugly. It doesn't work with most things. However, it can very well work on a brown and green earthy woody inspired build that's supposed to be like nature-esque. No armor enchants can really be relied on for drip. You can make them work in certain builds, but generally I wouldn't recommend putting any weight into them, so just don't use armor enchants if you can't find a way to make it work. Anyway, get these key details in and boom, you've just made the best drip of your life using color theory, symmetry, and silhouette shading. I hope you all enjoyed. Shout out to Cyberboy21, Goobka, and Drizzy Drake fan. I love you all, have an amazing day, and goodbye.